Let's see, recording
Recording is started.
okay. Okay, so this one was really easy, by the way, because it had like everything that you want in a good perspective match. I was going to cover a few things like that can kind of trip. I mean, they trip me up whenever the image just like doesn't really fit a good camera match. Um, I was trying to find like an old Sinesta rendering that was more straight on, but I didn't find it immediately because we ended up not using that photo. But basically, like, see how the lines in this image are like straight up and down along the z-axis. If you run into a situation where there's like no perspective on the y, like this one would have worked just fine. Um, but basically, if you run into situations where there's no y perspective at all, like if you're looking straight at something where the vanishing lines are not visible, you're not going to get a good perspective match in Max. But like this image right here is great because you have like a vanishing line, this sort of V shape is what you're looking for, and you'll get a good result out of that. The other thing I was going to say, like before I start um, talking about how to do this, this was the original image on Sinesta, and then this was the one I believe that the client ended up using for the street view, which has the perspective, the lens perspective or lens distortion, however you want to say it, corrected. Don't correct the for the lens perspective first. Like just leave it, no matter how bad it is, just leave it and do your rendering and then correct it in post. Because if you correct it first and then do your camera match, you'll break it. And Max, it's kind of like Max doesn't know how to like fake it. It needs to have that distortion in there. Another thing that I'll do is check the images like for any metadata. So like that particular one that you sent didn't have any metadata, but if I go to like my camera roll for my camera, like this one, and select on the properties, and this is just a JPEG, but this was shot with my Sony, and then you can go into details and it'll tell you some things about like the lens, which is embedded into a lot of the cameras already. And what you're looking for is the focal length, which in this case was 38 millimeter. So if you have one that's like really tricky, just having like that little bit of information can kind of help to see if you're just in the ballpark. Are you guys hearing me okay?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, cool. Dirk, do you want me to start from the very beginning or just kind of go over steps?
I would just start from the very beginning,
All right,
like bringing it in, setting up the camera,
doing
pivot
all
point,
that.
and all that stuff. Yeah.
All right, cool. Let me save this one. So the first thing that I did was just take note of the size of the image, so 6,000 by 4,000, or you can use some other script or whatever to do it. But basically, that's you're going to want to go ahead and set your render settings up so that they match the resolution and aspect of the original image or the background image, or at least lock the aspect down. You can always scale it if it's like really big or make the image smaller or whatever. But that's step one, and it's like going kind of slow because I have Revit open. But as soon as it opens the original file, I'll start over. Doo-doo-doo. All right, so this one's fairly close. I'll just turn the viewport background off. So I imported the CAD, and this was basically all we have. So we have this CAD file, and we have the image, which is here. And what I'm looking for from the CAD is just like where are the doors or where are the window openings, like what can I identify in the photo that I can also see on the CAD plan. And looking at the CAD plan, I've got that door, and I have a few bump outs on the wall. So that one, was fairly fairly quick to model up. And I would recommend, like, before you do the camera match, go ahead and just simply mass out the scene based on the plan. So, I mean, that was just a line that I extruded. And then I've got my two doors. I wasn't provided any elevation information, so I guessed. So these are 7 foot doors. And if you look at the photo, they have like this padding around the perimeter wall. So I just made that at the same elevation of the door to give me something to look for. And then in that other file, I also modeled this wall here because I wanted to know like where those bump outs were. And this is the goal, which you can also see the basketball goal, basketball hoop, whatever. I'm showing my athletic ignorance here, whatever you call that thing. I'm not a basketball player. This thing, the hoop. It's on the plan. So like in the new file that I just closed, I went ahead and did that wall and made a bump out right there just so I could see if everything would line up. All right, so once I've got all of that done, I'll just put a camera like basically where I think it needs to go. So when you look at tutorials online, that's not usually how they do it, but that's just how I've learned. Like that's the fastest way. If you can just guess, that's the fastest way. So, looking here, I catch this door, I catch that door. So going into the max file, I placed, and you can see like right now it's a target camera, which that's always how I start with a target camera. And then, obviously go into your view, and then once you've already set up your render settings, which I've already done, actually I should check it. This is the original file. It may not be set up in here. So yeah, so it matches 6,000 by 4,000, and you could always lock that down and make it smaller, but it doesn't really matter in this case. So that's all done, and then you can go into your viewport background and set it up, or you can set it up in the environment. Either way, I usually just do it this way. One's no better than the other. I've already got it loaded in here, and I'm going to match the rendering output. I would just get in the habit of doing that instead of matching the bitmap, because that will remind you that your render settings need to match the original photograph. Or that script that Reed mentioned is really good. I use it a lot now, that camera script, Reed. So if you have multiple images that are different resolutions or whatever, use that camera script, that camera mod script, and that'll work too.
Does that match rendering output? Does that automatically change
the render settings?
Yeah.
No, all it does.
What is it?
It's just gonna it's gonna tell the bitmap that's loading into the background to conform to the render output. So that's why it's important that they match, because otherwise it's going to distort the image. So just make sure that's locked down and that your render settings match the background image. And then, apply that, click OK. And you kind of see already like I'm kind of far off. It looks like it's a wider image. So, and this doesn't have to be perfect either. Like right now, we're not interested in making it perfect. All we really want to do is just kind of eyeball it and get it close. And the reason I found this to be effective is it kind of gives Max like a little bit of a head start, because if it knows nothing at all and you throw those perspective match lines down, it's not even going to try to get it right. It's just going to like basically just like put something random out there, and like it's really easy to break it. And whenever it's broken, and this is like, there's probably a good way to reset it. I haven't found a good way to reset it. Once you screw it up, you're in bad shape. Hold on. Madeline, are you okay? I thought I heard somebody fall. All right. Anyways, all right, so good. Maybe back that out just a little bit more. Whatever, something like that. Okay, so if I try to apply the camera match now, it's going to tell me I can't do it because it doesn't work with target cameras. So that's fine. Let's just go into the modifier and make this a free camera, because it has to be a free camera in order for it to work. So right now it's like a 16 mil focal length, which is probably, I don't know, we'll see. It's probably going to be a little bit too wide. I don't know. Now we can go over to the utilities panel and show the vanishing lines, and you can see it's cropping it down now to the it automatically applied the save frame. And then we just start setting up these axis points. At this point too, like for this image, since we're primarily focused on getting everything right, since this exercise is about showing them furniture in an existing space, and it's kind of important to match their plan, I'll just go to the furthest points that I can grab a point of reference on and drop my lines there. There's other examples like that. What was that job I did for Katie Dirk with the coffee kiosk? What was the name of that job?
I forget. It's just down the street from us.
Right. Well, like it's in our whatever Discord conversation in the project folder, but like that one I wasn't so much concerned about the edges. I just wanted to get it right kind of in the middle. You know what I'm saying? So like if there's a point in your image that's more important, then look for places where you can drop the lines there. Sometimes that helps. All right, so this is going to be my Y, adjust that on the Y, drag this one down, and you saw how it flipped because it's referencing that other Y axis, so it knew where to turn it. So drop that down. Okay, so match this one up over here. The length of these doesn't really matter so much.
Does having them further apart help at all? Like, meaning if that one you just dropped down, if you would have had it closer to the other one, would that change it at all? No.
I haven't seen that it really matters that much. In fact, a lot of times, once I get it like super close, I'll just move these to some random point where they're easier for me to see and just fine tune them. Like that Sinesta job on these right here, some of these didn't even line up. Like I just kind of forced Max to work based on the background image. And when I say they didn't work, they weren't like super far off. Like maybe, if we're looking at the scale of this, screen scale, it might just be like 4 or 5 pixels. But these aren't like hard and fast rules. You just need to adjust them to get the image to line up. And like when you have a good plan like this, like we have here, you're really just concerned with matching the background image. If you can get things to line up, then you can just adjust these however you want. Okay, so the part where this isn't very well documented, and I think I learned it by looking through the help file, but I didn't see it on any tutorial online, is just using a dummy object as a point of reference to move the camera match in screen space. That's kind of the key to making all of these camera matches work. If you don't do it that way, then you'll just be spinning your wheels. So I'll just go to the helper tab and make a dummy. Scale of it doesn't matter. The size of the dummy doesn't matter because it's really only going to use its pivot point. So that the scale is kind of arbitrary, but I just kind of like do something that I can see easily in the scene. And what I'm looking for is to I want to put that dummy object at some point in the scene that's going to provide a good reference for me that I can see really easily. Like that door, for example, if I were to, I didn't recess the door in the wall, so it's just flush with the wall right now, but I can see easily enough this base, the wall base right there. I can identify that. So if I just move my dummy with my snap on to that vertex right there on the door, that's exactly where this point in space would be. So if I go back to my camera now and back to my perspective match controls and pick an anchor point, my anchor point is going to be that dummy object. You can see how it updated whenever I did that. And it's really, I like to use the dummy objects because for some reason it's looking for those. The anchor point just, if you have dummy objects in your scene, it's always going to take precedence over a piece of geometry. So that's why I always make it that way. All right, so now that we're back, I just have like these walls kind of like made mostly clear. Just right click on them and change it to see-through. And now all of this is doing is changing the screen space. It's not affecting the camera's, it's like sliding it in screen space, I should say. So it's just horizontal and vertical. So all I really want to do is take this dummy object and line it up with that that point in space. Don't worry about anything else. In fact, if it's easier to see it, you can do it this way. And sometimes you have to refresh it. So right about there. And you can see that the scale is wrong, but that's where this distance slider comes in. So now all I'm really trying to do is just slide that into place. And you can see, like, for some reason, like, this isn't totally lined up perfectly. I will say, though, that, like, these plans are not always perfect. So there's always that. But you can see, like, it's almost lined up over there. And now you can go back and show your vanishing lines again. And this is where you can kind of go in and just make slight adjustments. It looks like, you know, that is probably causing me some problems. It looks like that's maybe a little bit off. And sometimes it'll change the camera and sometimes it won't. So, like, didn't really care about that. But like that, so a little closer. This going back over here. And I'm really, what I'm trying to watch is how things are lining up. I'm not even looking at these points anymore whenever I move this. I'm just trying to visually get things set up. And that, I mean, that's basically all there is to it. So let me open up the other one now. I spent a little bit more time just getting it aligned. It's basically just tweaking it. Any questions on that?
No, that makes sense. The I would imagine those doors are probably a little bit taller than what you're talking about. So
yeah, they
that's
could
probably
be.
why it's not much. Like, is that concrete block? I'll try it.
You mean the padding on the wall?
No, the actual wall behind it.
Oh yeah, I think it is CMU. Yeah, so you could look that way. I just made it 7 foot. You can see it's a little bit closer on this one, but still it's not perfect here. And that brings up a good point. Like, all cameras have lens distortion and no two lenses are exactly the same. You know, lenses breathe and there's all kinds of like complicated math and reasons why, you know, things aren't perfect. Walls aren't straight, floors aren't straight, you know, floors aren't completely flat, whatever. So there's a lot of reasons why things don't always match up perfectly. I mean, for all we know, there could be a little bit of grading on this gym floor. You know, ideally there wouldn't be, obviously, because it's a gym floor, but like when you're doing exterior stuff and you don't get things to match up perfectly, if you can get them this close, this is good enough for almost anything. You know, like if you have it this close and you're just doing some kind of a perspective match, then you can just work around it. You know, I mean, if I actually went in, where's my layers? I actually just scattered some chairs around because you already had the furniture in here. But say you were doing, if they just wanted to see, hey, what would it look like if we had 300 chairs in here? Well, that's going to be good enough for your composite because you're not even concerned with the walls at all. It's close enough for a lot of this type of work that we do, is all I'm saying. The other thing, and this is probably obvious, I know, I'm sorry, but if you don't know if you don't have a plan and you have to start from scratch and you have your perspective match done, AutoGrid is definitely your friend once you can identify a few things that are scaled correctly. Like I elevated that wall and then I just drew that plane on top of it, and then at this point, if I were going to do the continued modeling on this space, it would be super easy for me just to extrude these edges. I know that this is bumped out. I can tell by the photograph it's not bumped out much. It's probably about a foot. Same thing like with the ceiling. Drag it out. So it's really quick, even if you don't have a plan to go off of, to kind of remodel these things and get pretty close on the scale. But that's pretty much it.
Cool. This helps.
Awesome.
Appreciate it. You've already done all the work.
Cool.
No, I'm gonna go back.
Go ahead and send me that one there, Jody. I'll take it from here.
No, I'm gonna jump back into the original scene and do it over, so I can kind of do it.
No worries. I'll send you the max file, and then one thing that would be really helpful for me too. I haven't put much time into getting the material set up for V-Ray, but in Corona, I know where all of like the shadow mats and things like that. I know how they work for doing not just perspective match, but camera match stuff and things that are animated. V-Ray, I'm not as comfortable with yet, so maybe down the road, once I have more V-Ray experience under my belt, we can do another tutorial showing how to set up the materials for shadow mats.
There is one that I use. I don't have Max open right now. Oh crap! I forget. I forgot to set it up. I just have it set up in my material library.
Oh, cool.
Where if you render it, you basically put the plane down, and you put the material on it, and then if you render out PNG, it will just render the shadow on the invisible plane as like an AO.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a good way to do it. Another good way to do it is just to use the background as the scene environment, and you can do a shadow mat, or you can do a shadow mat and use the background image as an override essentially for the shadow mat. And so when you render it out, all of your reflections and things like that will just kind of naturally fall. Your reflections, your shadows and whatnot will naturally fall on the image. So it doesn't give you as much flexibility from a compositing standpoint, but it can just be a little bit faster, especially for animations.
Here's one question is, so you dropped in a regular, did you drop in a physical camera, or was that like a standard camera?
I think I used a physical camera, but it really shouldn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah, that really shouldn't matter. I mean, and you can see like it's amazing how cool like this technology is whenever it actually works. Like, I bet that's within a foot or two of where they took that picture from.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean the important thing is just start with your target camera, get it as close as you can, and then switch it over to a free camera after that. I find that's just the fastest way to do it.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thanks for the invite. These are always fun. And I'll send you this recording. I don't know like what in the world. I'll just stop the recording and see where it saves it, and I'll send it to you, Dirk.
Yeah, just save it, and then I can throw it on the YouTube link or into YouTube channel, and then we can share it.
Okay, will do.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks, Jody.
Yeah, cool guys. Talk to you later.
All right. Later.